So, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent just went before the Senate Banking Committee, got asked a straightforward yes or no question about whether grocery prices dropped in 2025, refused to answer it 5 times in a row while repeating numerous grocery prices have gone down like some kind of broken robot, got confronted by Senator Elizabeth Warren with his own government's Bureau of Labor Statistics data showing food prices rose 3.1%, admitted he has absolutely no plan to address affordability, and then continued gaslighting the American people by defending Donald Trump's completely absurd claim that the entire affordability crisis is a hoax perpetrated by Democrats. This is one of the most brazen examples of reality denial I've seen from a cabinet official in this administration. We're talking about the person in charge of managing the entire American economy standing in front of documented federal data from agencies he controls and just refusing to acknowledge what every single person watching this can verify with their own eyes every time they go to the grocery store. Warren comes armed with the numbers, the sources, the receipts from the BLS and USDA, and watches Bessent squirm his way through what might be the most embarrassing Treasury Secretary performance in modern history. Let's watch what happened, and I'll break down exactly why this matters and what it tells us about how truth has become completely optional in this administration.
So for a solid year while he ran for president, Donald Trump promised pretty much every day that he was going to lower costs on day one. If he was elected. Those were his words, not mine. So Secretary Bessent, you are one of the president's top economic advisors. Let's just start with a little truth-telling about the Trump economy 1 year in. Affordability is the top concern for Americans across the country. Donald Trump has called affordability, I want to get this right, a hoax. He's called it a scam. He's called it a con job. You're the Secretary of Treasury. You know the numbers. Is affordability a hoax, a scam, or a con job?
Senator, it may be a bit nuanced for you, but what President Trump is referring to is the media saying that the affordability crisis was generated by this administration when it was you and President Biden who destroyed the buying power of the American people. So there is an affordability crisis, and you were front and center in it.
So let me make sure that I understand. Donald Trump is not saying that affordability, what's happening to families right now, is a hoax?
He is saying that trying to lay the blame at this administration rather than the Biden-Warren economy is a hoax.
Okay, so it all happened before he got it. And everything that's happened since then, nothing is a hoax here.
21.5% cumulative inflation.
Let me just ask about what's happened in the 1 year that Donald Trump has been president. Last week, President Trump said, quote, "We have the groceries going down." Did grocery prices drop in 2025?
Numerous prices have.
Did grocery prices drop in 2025?
Numerous grocery prices have gone down.
I'm sorry, I don't know if you can't hear me. Did grocery prices drop in 2025?
Numerous grocery prices have gone down.
Some of them.
And in fact, we have seen inflation at 2.1% for the past 3 months.
Have you seen the Bureau of Labor Statistics, that is Donald Trump's own Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers, that report that grocery prices were 2.4% higher at the end of 2025 than they were at the end of 2024. Trump's own Department of Agriculture has projected that those prices would climb higher in 2026. And under Donald Trump, families are paying more and more for groceries. So if you're just going to insult people by denying the facts that are out there and tell people they're doing great when they're struggling, I think that's just another way to say you don't have a plan to bring down these prices. You're not willing to admit the failures of the Trump administration.
Senator.
I will ask you a question in just a sec here. It's not just groceries. The numbers from Trump's own economic agency show that Americans are paying more for utility bills, more for health care, more for housing construction. Families aren't fooled by these lies. Mr. Secretary, you owe it to American families to own up what's going on. And Secretary Bessent, I have one more question for you while I have you here. You ran the search for Donald Trump's Fed chair nominee, and Trump promised, quote, anyone that disagrees with me will never be Fed chairman. Kevin Warsh got the nod last Friday, and then over the weekend, Donald Trump joked that he would sue Mr. Warsh if he failed to lower interest rates. At least, I think it was a joke. But just in case, this should be an easy one, Mr. Secretary. Can you commit right here and now that Trump's Fed nominee, Kevin Warsh, will not be sued, will not be investigated by the Department of Justice if he doesn't cut interest rates exactly the way that Donald Trump wants?
That is up to the president. Can you commit that you will?
I'm sorry.
Can you commit that you will not hold
he
hold
won't
up?
Be sued if he doesn't drop interest rates.
Can you?
And he won't be criminally investigated.
The president
was
also made a joke about you that I won't repeat, Senator Warren.
That was the
actually,
easy
I will.
one.
He said he had reservations.
If this was a joke, why not just say so?
It was a joke, and he made a joke about you too, Senator Warren.
Yes,
he got
did.
a lot of laughs. Got a lot of laughs.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to respond to that.
I do want to respond.
What I can't
don't
tell you
think
to
the American
is
people
Mr.
are
Warsh
laughing.
is highly qualified.
They're the ones who are
and
struggling
why
with
don't you
affordability.
why don't you tell the nation what you told me, that you held up Chair Powell's renomination?
We're going to move on to the next one. Senator Rounds.
What you just witnessed was the Treasury Secretary of the United States refusing to acknowledge basic economic reality. Let's be clear about what just happened in that exchange. Elizabeth Warren asked Scott Bessent a simple factual question. Did grocery prices drop in 2025? Not a complicated policy question, not asking for economic theory, just did this number go up or down? And he refused to answer it 5 separate times. Instead, he keeps repeating this carefully crafted, meaningless phrase, numerous grocery prices have gone down, which tells you absolutely nothing. Because sure, some individual items went down, but the overall food index, the thing that actually matters to families trying to feed themselves, went up. Now here's what's really rich about this. Bessent isn't just making this up out of thin air on his own. He's defending a specific documented claim that Donald Trump made. Trump stood in front of a crowd in Mount Pocono, Pennsylvania on December 9th, 2025, and told them that the term affordability was a hoax perpetrated by Democrats. That's the actual word the President of the United States used to describe the economic struggles millions of Americans are experiencing. A hoax, as if families making impossible choices at the checkout line are just participating in some elaborate Democratic conspiracy. So now Bessent, Trump's handpicked Treasury Secretary, has to go before Congress and defend that insane statement, even though his own department's data completely contradicts it. Let me walk you through the actual facts here because this matters. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is part of the federal government, which Trump controls, which reports to Bessent's Treasury Department, released data in January 2026, showing that the food index increased 3.1% over the 12 months ending in December 2025. Food at home rose 2.4%. Food away from home rose 4.1%. These are not Democratic talking points. These are not progressive spin. This is the government's own official economic data. And it gets worse when you break down specific categories. The index for meats, poultry, fish, and eggs rose 5.85% in 2025 alone. That's a massive increase hitting families hard, especially families that were already struggling before Trump took office for his second term. And Warren doesn't just cite the BLS. She also references projections from Trump's own Department of Agriculture. The USDA Economic Research Service predicted in their January 2026 update that all food prices would increase 2.9% in 2025, with food at home predicted to rise 2.2% and food away from home predicted to rise 3.9%. So we're not just talking about prices that went up. We're talking about prices that the government's own agricultural economists knew were going to keep going up and did nothing to stop it. Here's a way to think about this. Imagine you go to the doctor because you're having serious chest pain. The doctor runs comprehensive tests, looks at results showing you have a dangerous heart condition, and then tells you numerous parts of your cardiovascular system are working fine. Technically true. Your kidneys might be okay, your liver might be functioning, but completely meaningless when the overall diagnosis is that your heart is failing. That's what Bessent is doing here. He's cherry-picking individual data points to avoid acknowledging the bigger documented reality. This is like if a burglar got caught by police standing in your living room holding your television, and when confronted said, numerous items in your house weren't stolen. Sure, maybe they didn't take your couch or your refrigerator, but they still took your TV. The existence of things that didn't increase doesn't change the documented fact that food prices overall went up significantly. And here's what makes this so deeply insidious. Bessent knows he's gaslighting people. He has to. This man is a Yale-educated financier who ran a successful hedge fund. He understands how price indices work. He knows the fundamental difference between anecdotal examples and aggregate economic data. But he's standing there in front of the Senate Banking Committee gaslighting the American people anyway because his boss made an indefensible claim and now he has to cover for it. Facts be damned. What we're really seeing here is part of a much larger, more dangerous pattern from this administration. Deny objective reality when it's politically inconvenient. Attack the messenger when you can't attack the message. Double down on lies even when confronted with documentary proof from your own government agencies. We saw this exact playbook with COVID data. We saw it with election results. We saw it with January 6th. And now we're seeing it with basic, verifiable economic statistics about grocery prices that every American can confirm just by looking at their own receipts. Because here's the thing, if they admit grocery prices are crushing families, they have to answer deeply uncomfortable questions. Why haven't Trump's policies fixed this? Why did his tariff threats make supply chains worse? Why is the affordability crisis actually getting worse under their watch after they promised to fix it immediately? Those are questions they cannot answer with facts. So instead, they just deny the problem exists entirely. Call it a hoax, tell people their lived experience is fake, gaslight an entire nation. This matters because when evidence doesn't matter anymore to people in power, you cannot have meaningful accountability. You can't hold officials responsible for policy failures they adamantly refuse to acknowledge even exist. Warren asks Bessent directly if he has a plan to address affordability, and he can't answer. Because how do you make a plan to fix a problem you're simultaneously claiming is a Democratic hoax? And I want everyone watching to think carefully about who the real victims are in all of this. It's not Elizabeth Warren. She's a United States Senator with a substantial salary, excellent benefits, and complete job security. She's going to be fine regardless of what happens with food prices. It's not even really Scott Bessent, though he certainly humiliated himself in that hearing by choosing to defend the indefensible. The real victims are the single parent working 2 jobs who watches their grocery budget get tighter every single month and can't understand why their paycheck doesn't go as far as it used to. The elderly couple on fixed Social Security income who have to choose between buying their prescribed medications or buying enough food to eat properly because their income hasn't kept pace with inflation. The young family trying desperately to save for a down payment on a house but can't because every extra dollar they earn immediately goes to rising costs for food, utilities, and childcare. The disabled person trying to survive on government assistance that hasn't been adjusted to reflect actual cost of living increases. And here's what should concern everyone even more. It's not just progressives or Democrats who are feeling this. According to a Politico poll from December 2025, 37% of Americans who voted for Trump in 2024 believe the cost of living is the worst they can ever remember experiencing. More than half of those voters say Trump bears at least some of the blame for the current economic situation. These are his own voters admitting the problem is real while their president calls it a hoax. The bottom line is this: Scott Bessent went into that Senate Banking Committee hearing with one fundamental job: explain to the American people and their elected representatives how the Treasury Department plans to help families struggling with rising costs that are documented in the government's own data. And he completely, utterly, embarrassingly failed. He had no real answers, no accountability, and no plan, just denial, deflection, and calculated gaslighting in service of defending an obvious lie from a president who refuses to acknowledge the everyday struggles of ordinary Americans. Elizabeth Warren came prepared with specific evidence from multiple government sources, asked direct questions that demanded yes or no answers, and refused to let him dodge or deflect. She exposed exactly what happens when an administration prioritizes political messaging and loyalty to the president over acknowledging basic, verifiable truth. And that should concern every single person watching this, regardless of your political affiliation or who you voted for. Because if they'll lie about something as fundamental and observable as grocery prices, something every American can verify just by looking at their own shopping receipts and comparing them to last year, what else are they lying about? And how can we possibly trust anything this administration says about the economy, about policy, about anything, when they won't even acknowledge their own government's data? One gaslighted grocery receipt at a time. If you found this detailed, fact-based breakdown helpful, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos where we actually examine the documentary evidence instead of just accepting political spin. Share this with someone who needs to understand what's really happening with grocery prices. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.